And so here we go with another edition of Thursday Nights in Revelation. We are going to be in chapter 6 tonight. Revelation chapter 6. And we're going to look. The judgments are about to begin. The scroll is in the Lord Jesus' hand, and he is about to break open the very first scroll. So as I go and share the screen, let's start reading now in verse 1, where John writes, "Now I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, I heard one of the four living creatures saying with a voice like thunder, 'Come and see.' And I looked, and behold, a white horse. He who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer." We continue on. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come and see." Another horse, fiery red, went out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another, and there was given to him a great sword. Then when he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a pale, I'm sorry, I missed one. Yeah. Scanned too fast, and I had Open Jim coming back in. All right, yes. Verse 5. Sorry about that. Verse 5, when he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hands. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine." And then verse 7, when he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him. And power was given to him over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth. Okay, so these are the typical 4 horsemen of destruction, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, all sorts of great names that people have given to this picture over the years. So let's go back and let's kind of break this down and see who's who, and see what this is representing and what this is pointing to. Okay, so remember that the scene right now is in heaven, but soon as we see the seal break in heaven, then we see what happens on the earth in response, and it's a series of judgments. Okay, so the first seal that's broken, John looks and sees a white horse, and typically you see a white horse. A white horse will depict victory. It will depict somebody, the conqueror, a king who conquers a city, who conquers a state, would typically ride in as the conquering king on a white horse. And that white horse is symbolic of that victory, of that conquest. And so you contrast that with how Jesus rode into Jerusalem the week he was to be crucified. He was riding on a what?
Donkey.
He was riding on a donkey, which symbolizes the fact that he was a king that's coming in peace. He's coming to bring peace. A white horse is not like that. Now, it's interesting when you talk about the identity of the rider on the white horse. There are some who would point to the fact that only Jesus rides the white horse, so this is referring to the Messiah. Problem with this is the rest of the passage here in verse 2. So let's take a little look with this, see what else is going on. John notices that the one who sits on the horse had a bow. And what's interesting about that is that he has a bow, but he has no arrows. And so he becomes a conquering king, but he doesn't have to use violent means to get to that point. He conquers, but he conquers, we would say, without firing a shot. Okay, now, a couple of other things that point to the fact that this is someone other than the Messiah. A crown was given to him. Notice that he doesn't take the crown. Notice that he doesn't pull it off of somebody else's head, but the crown is given to him. Now, this isn't the crown that's given to a king. Rather, it's a crown that's given to a winner. It's a word, Greek word Stephanos, and it was given in like the Olympic Games and the Isthmus Games that were played near Corinth. They were given to winners of different races, of different athletic competitions. So this is the kind of olive wreath crown that he receives. It's given to him. And then notice he goes out conquering and to conquer. And so it talks about that the repetition of that points to a not just a successful conquering, but a one that extends throughout the world. Okay, now we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but I want to bring in a couple of more pictures of this, because this looks like, people will call him the Antichrist. And that's the person that we're talking about, but I think it's important to remember that John never uses the word Antichrist in the book of Revelation. And I think that's important to remember, that an Antichrist is someone who simply sets himself up against Christ. Typically who it is, someone who rejects Jesus as Messiah. That's an Antichrist. But this is, we talk about the guy, the Antichrist. We're going to look at a couple of other passages right now that describe him. And the first one we're going to look at is Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9, and we're actually going to begin reading in verse 20. And I'm scrolling up here if you look with me on the screen. We'll start in verse 20. Daniel is writing, and he says this: "Now, while I was speaking, praying, and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God for the holy mountain of my God, yes, while I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, reached me about the time of the evening offering. And he informed me and talked with me and said, 'O Daniel, I have now come forth to give you skill to understand. At the beginning of your supplication, the command went out, and I have come to tell you, for you are greatly beloved. Therefore, consider the matter and understand the vision.'" And then he goes into this vision and the explanation. And the explanation is about as cryptic as the vision. So listen to this: 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah, Prince of Peace, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The streets shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublesome times, pointing to a restoration of Jerusalem before these end times. But then notice verse 26. "And after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself." Literally, there's nothing here for him. "For the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end of it will be with a flood, till the end of the war of desolations is determined." Now, going further, "Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate." Okay, so what this is pointing to is this abomination here in verse 27, "who confirms a covenant with many for a week." It seems as though this is a deal that's going to be cut between this beast, this rider on the white horse, and the people of Israel. And it will be apparently a deal for a week. And many scholars, many interpreters point that to mean 7 years. Okay, so there's going to be this deal for 7 years that the sacrifices and the offerings, in other words, everything that goes on in the temple will resume, and it will be for a period of 7 years. And so there's an implication there that the temple is going to be rebuilt. Pretty phenomenal to keep in mind. But then it notices in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to it. Okay, so at about the halfway point, the deal's off. So 3.5 years, there's not going to be any more sacrifices that the Jews will make to the Lord. The temple sacrificial system will be gone at that. Okay, so let's put in another layer for this. Okay, another place where this is referred to is over by Paul in 2 Thessalonians Chapter 2. 2 Thessalonians Chapter 2, beginning in verse 1. Let's take a look at that. It says, now, brethren, concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him, we ask you not to be soon shaken in mind or troubled, either by spirit or by word or by letter, as if from us, as though the day of Christ has come. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God, or that is worship, so that he sits in as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So here's another piece of evidence that points to the likelihood that the temple is going to be rebuilt. Now, this man of sin, this son of perdition, is pointing to the same one, I believe, in Revelation 6, the rider on the white horse. I think it's all one and the same. And he's the one that's going to cut the covenant off at the halfway point, 3.5 years. And notice what Paul says, that he's going to go and exalt himself above all that is called God or all that is worshiped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God. So what he's going to do is, it looks like he's going to just wipe off the whole Judaism, Judaistic rituals, all the sacrificial system that's pointed out and mentioned in Leviticus that was done in the temple. That's all going to be pushed aside, and he's going to be the one sitting in the most holy place in the temple saying, I'm the God that you're to worship. Okay? So questions on that so far? Because we got
another. Well, the mosque is where that is at. So how in the world can he be in that temple? They had to rebuild the temple, you said, but the mosque is there. Are the Arabs going to let them get away with that?
Okay, well, remember, go back. In fact, let's just do that right now. We'll go back to Revelation 6 and look at verse 2 and look at this description. He has a bow, but he has no arrows.
Right.
And a crown was given to him. He didn't take it. So that means then that it's almost by world acclamation that he becomes the world ruler. Now, let's just play this out, because you mentioned a very interesting point that we have right now, Jack, is that we have one of the important Islamic mosques that's there on the Temple Mount. And, without going into all the details of that, there's a whole story behind that. But in order for the temple to be rebuilt, that mosque has to be done away with. And even the mention of rebuilding the temple starts an entirely new series of battles and fights and wars and explosions and all the rest in the Middle East. Just the mention of it. So imagine one guy able to broker a peace deal between Israel and the Islamic world, to where they will allow that to happen and they will allow the temple to be rebuilt. Somebody who could do something like that, do you think that's going to be a pretty popular guy in the world?
Absolutely. Have to be popular, I guess.
If you can
get away with it.
If you can bring peace to the Middle East, everybody's going to want you to be their boss, you know. and this is what he's going to be able to do. And this is the implication here with the rider on the white horse. Has a bow, doesn't have any arrows, crown is given to him. And so it's a fascinating picture. Now let's add into this one more passage over in Revelation 13. Now I know this is chapter 13 as opposed to chapter 6, but chapter 13 I think is going to give us a little more of a picture of what is happening here. Okay, so let's begin reading chapter 13 verse 1. John says, then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth was like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. Okay, so look at this. The dragon is referring to Satan. Satan now has drawn up out of the sea, and typically, scholars point to the fact that when somebody comes out of the sea, they're coming out of the nations. They're coming from the Gentiles, and so a lot of people think and would suggest that this beast, this man of sin, son of perdition that we've been talking about, the rider on the white horse, is going to be a Gentile. And some would even go so far as to point to him and say he's of Roman descent. I don't know that I go there, because I think there's too many variables that just don't fit. But what is interesting about this is that Satan is the one who gives him his crown, gives him his power, gives him his authority. So all of this authority is given, and now the population of the world is going to give him a victor's crown. You've won. And so this seems to dovetail. So this beast points to the fact that he's the one who is the rider on the white horse. Now, another thing that's interesting about this is the time frame. When do these horsemen appear, and when does all of this occur? Well, if you go a little bit further with this, you start to see that this is going to take, this doesn't just happen overnight. Okay, so notice it says, I saw in verse 3, I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. So this person, this world ruler, apparently is going to suffer a fatal blow. He's going to be killed, and he is going to be raised back to life. And
who in the world could kill him?
What? What's that?
Who in the world could kill him?
It's a great question. It's not said. Nothing's mentioned.
It said as if it has been mortally wounded, not had been mortally wounded.
But then you go back, Alice, and look at the next statement. And his deadly wound was healed. So
but that's like, okay, so have you ever seen
no.
With the birthmark, it looks like it's healed over.
No, it's the problem that you have is the word deadly. Okay?
Deadly?
John's giving a report as if it looks as if his head has been mortally wounded, but the deadly wound was healed.
But have you ever seen Gorbachev and the birthmark on his head that looks
apples
just like
oranges.
a blood, like blood?
No,
like
that's apples and oranges, Alice.
Okay.
When John says it's a deadly wound, it's a deadly wound.
I'm just wondering who would have wounded him, who had the ability to do that.
Good question. We're not told that, but he's healed. And the reason we know that this is another reason we know it's a deadly wound is you keep on reading, and it points to the fact that all the world marveled and followed the beast. Everybody followed the beast. When this guy is killed and everybody knows that he's dead and he comes back to life, the entire world marvels and they follow after him. And so notice what they do. Notice what they do. They worship the dragon, who gives authority to the beast, and they worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast, who is able to make war with him.
Yeah, the nuclear atomic age. Who is able to stand against a world government that has?
I'll go ahead and let you unmute, Alice, but that's jumping the gun. We're going to stay in the Bible. We're not going to put today's parallels into this because we do not know when this happens.
We're not going to be here anyhow.
We do not have a time frame. This could happen.
Just a consideration. I'm not saying I'm right. It's just, it may be a prophecy of what we now see in the 20th century.
No, the reason for that, the reason that it's not, Alice, is because you don't see the church mentioned in any of
the believers aren't here.
So the church is raptured out. The rapture hasn't happened yet. This doesn't happen until after the church is taken out.
Right.
Okay, so none of this happens, and we don't know when the church is going to be taken out.
So you're saying all this stuff that's described here is not coming to light yet?
No.
Because there's a lot of figurative language here.
But people have been finding parallels for 2,000 years, and it doesn't take long to go back and look at writers in the church for 2,000 years, and they were finding parallels to all sorts of people in their contemporary time. And so it's not a good exercise to try to find parallels today.
So basically you're saying all the ones that are in Christ will be raptured and will never even see all the stuff that we're reading about now.
I didn't say that we won't see it. We won't.
You might see it from heaven.
We won't experience it. We are not going to be on the ground, as it were. Okay.
Yeah, we'll be in heaven.
But let's go on with this, because here's something that's interesting. Verse 5, he says he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And he was given authority to continue for 42 months or 3.5 years. Now, keep in mind, if we go back to Daniel.
You think he was blasphemous like Goliath?
Keep back. Stay with me here. He says in verse 27, he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate.
Okay, so that's in the middle of the tribulation period,
what
right?
He's doing, here's the halfway point.
Yeah, the halfway point.
So keep in mind that's part of the time frame that we're looking at with this. And so when we go back to Revelation 13, we'll see that this 42 months is at the halfway point. Okay, and so this is when the temple sacrificial system is done away with, and the beast, this man of sin, this rider on the white horse, is going to establish himself as the one who is God. He is the God that you're to worship.
Now, like you said on your chart, nothing of this can happen like this until the church is taken out, the Holy Spirit is taken away.
So with that, what other questions do you have?
Chris, could you repeat that? Because you cut out. For some reason, hear you.
Where did you lose me?
That very last part.
Oh man, now I got to remember what I said, how I said it.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So again, the how this ties together is that this person, this man of sin, is going to wow the world, and he is going to achieve at some point world domination. He is going to be the world ruler. And what it seems to be that when the crown is given to him as the conqueror, it may be at the time where his fatal wound was healed. And the whole world marvels, and they worship him, they follow him, and they worship the dragon, Satan, and they also worship the beast. Okay, so at that point then, he's moved from world ruler, now he's moved into the place of God. So this is where he's moved into. So he's taken his place in the Jewish temple as the God that should be worshiped. No more shall you worship the God of Judaism. No more should you worship the God of the Bible.
Okay, so now are we saying that here in 4 where it refers to the beast, is the beast synonymous with the Antichrist?
Okay.
One and the same?
Yeah, that's the
Yes.
Antichrist.
Yes. But,
Okay.
but remember, keep in mind that John doesn't use that term Antichrist. It's kind of it's something that we tend to add on just for our understanding, the Antichrist, but actually John doesn't use that word. He uses the word beast. He describes him as the rider on the white horse, but never as the beast. Antichrist.
Well, who's that false prophet they talk about?
Hang
The
on,
beast and
hang
the
on,
false
Jack.
prophet.
Hang on, Jack. Antichrist typically refers to someone who is simply rejecting Christ as Messiah, rejecting Jesus as the Messiah. He is Antichrist. But this guy goes much further. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll write Antichrist with a capital A. So it's
Or
a same
claiming
person.
superior power to Jesus
So-
Christ.
so
Albert Einstein saying that the nation that will first grab the atomic weapon shall rule the world. How is that not comparing yourself to a ruler mightier than God himself?
See, again, you can look at world history and say, oh, that's got to be it. But when we get into when this really comes down, the things that are described in Revelation, other things are going to pale in comparison. This is going to be exponentially more severe, and it's going to be very clear.
Then
And very
Rome,
blatant.
back then,
So-
Rome was considered the ruler of the world.
So getting back to you, Susie, with that question. So yes, Antichrist, beast, man of sin, rider on the white horse. That's all, I believe, one and the same guy.
Well, I'm
Okay.
glad we're not going to be here.
Okay. Yep. I got that, Jack. Okay. So any other questions on the white horse, beast, man of sin? Anybody else? Anybody else have a question?
War and conquer and domination seems to be the name of the game since
Okay.
Cain and Abel.
So let's go to the second seal. Let's look at the next horse. When he opened the second seal, I heard the voice of I heard the second living creature saying, "Come and see." Another horse, fiery red, comes out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another, literally slaughter one another, and there was given to him a great sword. Okay, so we're talking about that when this rider appears, this fiery red horse, the rider on it brings about what looks to be a world war. And I mentioned in my message that it's better for us not to call this World War III because of the timeline. We don't know when this is all going to happen. We could have a third world war before this happens, or in a fourth or a fifth. So all that to say, this will be a world war. Now, it's interesting that it happens after the rider on the white horse appears. So it sounds to me that what happens in this is that the beast will ascend to world domination within 3.5 years, and he will be worshipped by the world as God, by most people, for the last 3.5 years. But what appears to be with this red horse is that there will be resistance. There will be some that will not. Now, and so he will go to war against them and overcome them. So let's go back to Revelation 13 and take a look at that. Let's look a little further down, and we will go to verse 6. We'll just start in verse 6. Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. And it was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. Okay, so what appears to be happening is that those who refuse to worship him, those who refuse to submit to that, to that worship, are going to be the believers of Christ. They are going to be the believers who have heard the witness, they've heard the gospel, and so they've believed in Jesus, they've received everlasting life, but now they face this kind of persecution. And what John says in verse 7, it was granted to him to make war with the saints and to conquer them. So he's going to win the war. And so that seems to parallel the red horse, doesn't it? The fiery red horse. There's going to be a war on a world scale, and it's going to be the beast versus those who follow Christ. And those will be Gentile believers, they will be Jewish believers. And what will happen is that there are going to be many who will lose their lives.
So now those are the ones that were left behind, right? Because they didn't know Christ.
Those are going to be the ones who came to believe in Jesus for everlasting life after the rapture.
Right, after the rapture, right.
Okay, so it seems that is where this red horse comes in. It's going to happen in that part, in that moment. Okay, so don't know if you've ever thought about that. Let me see if you have any questions.
You know, Chris, one thing, with the rapture, you're going to be taking all the believers. So it's kind of interesting that yet there will be some who will come to Christ after all the believers are gone. So they're going to be almost doing it, I don't want to say on their own, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and what's fascinating about this, Susie, is that as you read this, you will see these saints, these believers who are in heaven, and John says on more than one occasion there are thousands and thousands and tens of thousands and tens of thousands, and I can't count them all. There's so many of them. And so there's going to be a huge harvest of people coming to faith in Jesus during this time. It's going to be
that's because of the witnesses, right, Pastor? The 144,000.
Well, it's going to be first from the 2 witnesses, then from the 144, but then there's going to be a lot more than that, much more than that are going to be sharing the gospel, sharing the good news.
Yeah.
So.
Well, doesn't the Bible teach that no man's going to be without excuse when Jesus comes again? So some people, I think, are going to come to faith simply because they heard the gospel but didn't receive it, and now they realize how wrong they were.
So who is this Antichrist that all who dwell on the earth will worship him? Who is this him? Any idea?
No, it's not.
Who is it that they're worshiping?
Well, that's the beast.
He has not come onto the scene yet. He's not going to come onto the scene till after the church is raptured.
He's not made known yet.
No.
The Holy Spirit will prevent him from coming on the scene.
It's really futile and pointless and really not profitable to try to figure out who that might be, because you don't know. And for all we know, that the individual hasn't even been born yet. I think he has. I still think that people who worship the atomic age do exactly this: worship the Antichrist. There's been a lot of people faith in a nuclear weapon. There's been a lot of people over the centuries that have tried to identify the Antichrist as any number of people, and they've all been wrong.
I remember one time they said Kissinger was.
So how do you justify nuclear weapons?
I'm sorry.
Answer my question.
Okay. Angie, go ahead.
I just want to say that we got to stop talking over you so that we can hear your answer to those questions.
Okay. All right. So again, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be coming to Christ, and I think you're right. Deb, when you mentioned that there's going to be a lot of people that when they see their friends suddenly disappear, and they're looking around, what happened? Oh, all those people that I knew were believers and they're gone. Wait, and they're gonna look around. Wait, maybe what they were talking about, that book, the Bible. Let's pick that up. Let's take a look at it. Oh my gosh, that's true. That's what happened to them. You know, they're going to read it. It'll all.
Pastor, here's
It's
another
awesome.
thought.
Mhm.
Like when I was telling you my brother, he was an airline pilot. If the rapture occurs and the pilot's in the plane and there's no one
Yeah.
left in the plane, there's going to be a lot of accidents, especially cars too. It's going to be all hell on earth.
Well, yeah,
Such thing as hell on earth.
yeah. Well,
Heaven and earth are separated from
it's gonna be difficult for sure. It'll be difficult for sure. All right. Anything else on the red horse? Okay, so we're ready to go to the black horse. Let's see. We'll go to verse 5, Revelation 6. If you're looking on the screen, it says, when he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, come and see. So I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine. So in other words, this is pointing to a worldwide famine.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
And that almost would follow from a world war. If you've ever seen the European landscape after World War I, I'm surprised anything grew after that. There was such desolation there. War just ravages a land. And so it doesn't surprise me in the least that there would be something like that. And then on top of that, when you add on these other judgments, when you see a third of the oceans turn to blood, and you see a third of the fresh water supply turn to blood and made undrinkable, and then later all of it, little surprise that something like that would happen.
Yeah, just like when Moses' time, when that happened with Pharaoh.
Yep, even this is exponentially harsher.
Yeah.
Okay. So any questions on that? Kind of stands to reason there's going to be a worldwide famine after a world war.
That's why it's so important for us to get the message out, right, Pastor? So people
right,
don't have to
so-
go through that.
So let's go to the fourth horse. Let's go to the fourth seal. When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, come and see. So I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him, and power was given to them over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth. Now, doing the math on this, a fourth of the earth is pretty significant. You could do a quick search of world population 2020 or 2021, and you'll find that it's 7.9 billion. So if you just round it up to 8 billion, and assuming that the world population is going to continue to increase, we're looking north of 2 billion people.
Yeah.
Will lose their lives during this. Now, I tend to think that this is going to be kind of a combination of all of the above. There's going to be the war, there's going to be the famine, and then there's going to be all the death that's going to result from all of this all put together. And the carnage is going to be immense. And so if you were to say, just being very generous, that there were 2 billion believers on the earth at the time of the rapture, and you've got 2 billion believers raptured, you got 25% of the population gone, and then you've got these 2 billion that are raptured or that lose their lives, you're looking at maybe a half of the world population exterminated by the time this is over.
How many people do you think will be taken up in the rapture? Any idea? As far as Christians on the earth right now?
No idea. I mean, the only one that knows who has everlasting life and who doesn't is the Lord Jesus and that
Amen.
individual.
That's right.
Okay, so we're kind of grasping for straws. If you were to do a Google search and just type in number of Christians in the world in 2021, you'd get somewhere around 2.5 million or 2.5 billion.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah.
Somewhere in there. Now, that there's a lot of fudge factor in that, should I say, because that's just kind of counting church membership. Okay, so if you are affiliated with any church that's identified as a Christian church, then you're a Christian. And so they're looking at that number. That's the only number they really can look at to go by. So if that number is 2.5 billion, let's just say you take, just for the sake of calculations, you take 500,000 off of that, you have 2 billion. So I don't know.
Maybe it means Africa.
I don't know.
The earth.
Going to be
Large continent.
going to be a massive number.
Maybe it just means Africa. That's a really big continent. It looks like a fourth of the earth. Literally.
When you look, if you were to look at the population of China and India, both of those countries are around 1.4 billion.
But I don't know if they mean a fourth of the population or literally like a physical earth, like continent.
No, I think they're talking about population there.
Population? Well,
Yeah.
It says earth. It doesn't really specify population.
Yeah, well, the word earth there is, well, let's see, fourth of the earth. Yeah. Well,
Earth could be like physical earth,
so
like the continent.
it could be the physical earth, but more than likely it's going to be, it's referring to the population, because you're killing, and that's the issue there. The whole context of this is that this is a pale horse, and you notice that there are two entities following, which is death and Hades. Now, quick word about Hades. Hades is the place right now where the unbelieving go after they die. This is the place of torment for those who do not believe in Jesus and they die without Christ.
Well, that's the same place where the rich man went, right?
That's
Lazarus.
That is Hades. Okay,
Yeah.
it's always Hades in the New Testament is associated with punishment. Okay, so these two are following after. And so this is the death and the destruction on top of that. Now, what we don't know is, and it's still, at least it's not clear to me, is, does this number, a fourth of the earth, is this going to include the believers who are killed in this war with the beast? When we look at Revelation chapter 13 and we look at verse 7, it was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. Okay.
Pastor, what I look at is all those around the throne of God with the white robes. They were saying, when are we going to be able to get things done?
That's the fifth seal. That's next week.
Oh, okay.
We'll talk about that. But my question, and what I'm not sure of, is, how much of that fourth includes the tribulation saints that are killed, and I'm still not sure.
Well, they were the ones that came through the tribulation.
Well,
Killed.
No, they lost their lives, but they were,
yeah, they lost their lives.
But they were faithful and obedient to the end. They didn't come through it. They came through it obedient and faithful, if that's what you mean. But they didn't make it to the end.
To a war making nation or a war making government. It just sounds so simple. They didn't submit to a war making nation or government, no matter what gold or promises or threats were thrown at them.
Well, it was, you got to read and understand that this is a government that is given to him by acclamation,
Right.
because of the wonder and the awe, because he was dead and now he's alive. And it's rather interesting, just kind of going back to that, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But he establishes himself as God, and those who refuse to worship him as God need to be eliminated. They need to be removed. And so that's where the war comes in. So he works on that, and that's a part of the process, is to eliminate all opposition. Now, I think it's rather interesting when you read this, when you go back to chapter 12, and when we get here, as we go through the book, we'll look at chapter 12, and we'll talk about the dragon, we'll talk about Satan, and what Satan is essentially doing during the time of this tribulation is that he's setting up for himself a copy, his own little version of the Trinity. So he'll set up himself, the dragon, he'll set up the beast, this world ruler, and then he will set up who is called, it's a second beast, comes out of the land, and we read about that later in chapter 13.
But is that the false prophet?
Called the false prophet.
Look up
Yeah.
big
So-
three. on
and
Google.
so
Look up the
he's-
big three.
So he's taking the Trinity, and he's making his own twist. He's twisting it and distorting it to make himself out to be God, but it's really such a cheap knockoff.
Look up the big three: Stalin, Roosevelt, and help
Yeah.
me out, Churchill. Look up the big three meeting after the peace treaty.
No, that's futile. It is utterly futile
Okay,
to point
there's
to.
a reason they called them the big three. They were
Well-
sitting in chairs, smiling, being conquerors of the free world.
Has nothing to do with what we're reading in
Okay,
Revelation.
maybe they didn't mock the Trinity. Maybe I misread that. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, looking at the pale horse and the death and destruction that he brings, what else are you wondering about him? This pale horse. No questions at all?
Well, it says to
Well, it
kill.
says it was death in Hades.
Okay. Okay, Deb, I heard you. Go ahead.
Okay, well, it says that he killed with death. So, I mean, yeah, with death. How can you kill with death? And my Bible says plague, with plague.
Maybe it means AIDS or like SARS or something like that.
Yeah,
Like this,
Well, the word literally is death, Greek word death. It's interesting just looking at my comment here.
Pestilence.
Guy wrote this commentary in 1887. He substitutes pestilence, and he points out that the Hebrew word for pestilence is rendered in the Greek with the word thanatos, which is what we see here. So
Yeah.
he's pointing that to being a plague.
So in other words, he pointed that as the Black Plague.
No, he's just it was used to describe it, but it's a pestilence. It would be like a disease. It would be
it
like
really sounds like
a
Africa, guys. I'm sorry.
it would
There's so
be a
much
worldwide
more
pandemic.
hunger, disease, wild beasts, and AIDS in Africa. It just smacks of Africa to me.
Okay.
But I don't know. I
Okay.
could be wrong.
That's fine. That's fine.
Alice,
Yeah.
Alice, you're cracking me up because you're, it's like you're,
Yeah, I do that, Angie.
you're trying to,
Nobody ever likes to hear my thoughts because
you're trying to like point to current and history and in all of this. And
all I know is the
have
20th
to-
century that I'm growing up in, dear. I can't
I
help it.
recognize that, but I also want to remind us all about the fact that we are told that no one knows the time.
Yeah.
So, and looking in the past is kind of useless
That's what I'm
because
saying. Sounds
this
like
is
I'm
a
not saying
7-year
factual
thing.
things. Yeah, it's
Okay,
just
Alice, you're not
Okay,
listening.
let the pastor get on you guys.
You're not listening again, so I'm going to have to mute you for a moment. But let me point out a couple of things again, and one of them is the fact that again throughout history people have tried to do this. They've tried to put parallels into their contemporary day with what they read in Revelation. That's why if you were to go and look at, if you were to do a Google search on list of people identified as Antichrist through history, that list goes on and on and on and on and on and on. And there are so many different versions of, okay, this is referring to the Roman Empire. This is referring to the Roman Catholic Church. This is referring to any number of things that were a problem in their current, in their era, in that moment. But again, it's important to remember, this is yet to come. This
I got an Antichrist for you, alcohol sales.
This all is future. Okay, fine. That's fine. You're not listening again. But so we're going to leave that there. Okay, we'll leave that there. All right. With that, looking at our time, any other observations? Let's just go back and look. You've had a chance to look at these four horses. You've looked at some of these passages that speak about this rider on the white horse, identified as the man of sin, identified as the beast. You know, he's popularly known as the Antichrist. You know, what questions might you have, or something that you're wondering as you read this and reread it? What else comes to mind? What other observations? Or let some of y'all speak here.
Well, I was trying to make the point about the plague, how, you know, we have this world pandemic, which, you know, it just goes to show how quickly something like that can happen. And the reality that you don't think that it can affect the whole world, but it can. And so it just goes to prove what in Revelation, when it says these things can affect the whole world, how easily it can happen. We've seen a taste of it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to make, is that we can, by looking at our current day, we can see how possible all this is. And as we go further on in history, we can see how possible this is. I guarantee you 100 years ago, people were struggling, and you can read commentaries that were written 100, 200 years ago about Revelation, that they were really flummoxed about what this mark of the beast might be. And how could you do that? How could you have a worldwide system of currency and do a worldwide economy with no money? You know, it's really preposterous. So this must refer to something else. But now look at us.
Well, and when Europe went to the euro, I mean, who'd have ever thought that would happen? I remember lots of people talking about it. Oh, it's the one world currency.
Yeah, but look what's going to happen now, Angie. Everyone's going to cryptocurrency.
But again, it's not. None of it is. But you see how more likely all of this is coming into fruition. I mean, it's just
right.
Like the pieces are just starting to slowly move into place, and it's about ready to go down. You know, you can
Guys,
see
I want to know, Hiroshima and Nagasaki happened for a reason. Every car you see driving down the street is either Toyota or Honda. Something Japanese made robs people of their legs, their free will, their lungs, for crying out loud. This is not just coincidence. We already see all this. That's disgusting.
Okay, I'm going to stop.
That's purely financial.
I'm going to stop that.
Yeah, you're right, Jim. It's all money.
I'm going to stop on that one there.
Yeah, Pastor. Pastor.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
This is the 21st century, and a lot of us are still thinking about the 21st century. We're talking here about way, way in the future, way. I'm retired, and I read a lot, and I have books by different commentators, like Harry Ironside, Tim DeLay, David Jeremiah, and I've read all of those, and I agree with everything that you say. Everything that you have said is actually what comes out of the Bible. Now, don't the other folks here don't associate any of this with the 21st century. See?
Well, I think the one thing that they're doing, Jim, is not so much that they're associating it, but they're seeing how possible all of this could be. Just different advents. They're you know, the likelihood of a one world currency is much more believable now than it was, say, 100 years ago or 200 years ago. It's people can look and say, oh, I could see that happening a lot more now than they could back then. But you're right in that we shouldn't take and make equivalents of what we see today. I don't know, Jim, that we're a long ways off. I mean, if the Lord comes back in the next 5 minutes, this stuff's going to start happening awful quick. You know, right. The clock's going to be ticking pretty quick. So it could happen that quickly. But the Lord tells us to be ready, have our lamps trimmed, to be found obedient, to be found prepared, to be found faithful when that moment comes.
And you need to be the bride of Christ, right? You have to have the Holy Spirit.
And I think that's got to be important. I think that's the thing we've got to remember to keep in mind as we read all of this. Yes, you know, I think none of us are going to be here, but at the same time, we may know somebody who will. Just all depends. Dale, I see.
Yeah, I think the key to this is that this all happens after the rapture. If we are tying this to things that have happened in the past, like the Second World War, or things that are happening right today, then that means that the rapture has already occurred.
And try Napoleon.
Most of us do not believe that the rapture has already occurred.
Try Napoleon.
No. And it will not, these things will not happen until after the rapture occurs. So you can't tie it to current events because the rapture has not occurred yet. If it occurs tonight, then you can start saying what's happening is tied to this. But there's the key right there. The rapture has got to occur first.
But and it's why you can't agree that
it's why you can't compare things that happened in the past either.
Yeah, the past is gone. It's done over, and it's not. It's
yeah.
That's right.
And like you were saying, no one knows the day or the hour, Angie, when it's going to happen.
No, and we don't know when that trigger is.
That's right.
But it's rather vivid. And that's why I think it's important as we go through Revelation, we let the story play out, we describe it, and we look at it in that future tense. And we do our best to avoid making an equivalent to today. I think sometimes we can look at something today, an advance that's happened today, and that just adds to the imminence that this is going to happen, you know. And sometimes that's a wondrous thing to look at, you know, where like I mentioned 100 years or 200 years ago, something would have just seemed impossible. You read the writings of people living in that time, and they say, well, that couldn't happen, so this must refer to this, and then we move forward, and then all of a sudden, you know, you start to see, you know, this could happen. It is happening. You know, something like this is similar, but it's not the real thing. You know, and so you just kind of it lends the air of that's not so far-fetched. That's not so, I can see how that might work. I can see how that might happen, even though we don't know exactly how it's all going to go down. And I think that's important to remember too.
Yeah, and I also think it's important to recognize that because of how it's going to go down, the order of how it's going to go down, this is not written for us to try and guess when it's going to go down. It's written to give us an urgency for others, to win them for Christ, so that they don't have to live through this.
I agree with Angie 100%.
As well
For
as give people who do end up not being raptured and maybe come to Christ afterwards something to expect.
What channels?
Yeah. So
That's why it's so
61.
important to carry out the Great Commission.
So are you saying, Angie, that I probably need to take my circle around September the 13th off? You saying?
Well,
Probably.
Okay.
yeah,
All
but
right.
When I was a kid, my mom always said when I was a kid, I would say, well, if Jesus comes back, I don't have to take that test, and I don't know, take that spelling test or that math test or
Yeah, you don't have to be put through torture for no reason.
We can hold on to that. All right.
If he comes back before tax time, then I don't have to pay taxes. If he comes back before.
You should pay your taxes.
Yeah. Isn't that great? Yep.
Pastor,
Jim, one more thing. Go ahead.
the first time I went through Revelation, I was thinking, what is going on here? Well, and I can see where new people that are reading can feel that way. But if you go over and over, it'll come to you. Get a Bible with references, because everything in Revelation is explained elsewhere in the Bible. As we saw tonight, Daniel, and also Matthew has it. Like I said, I have a lot of commentary books that explain the Bible and Revelation practically word by word.
Well, I think.
Jim, did you get a copy?
It'll all come clear to you. Like I say, I understand everything you said tonight because I've been studying this. Now, Did you get a copy of the map the pastor put together?
Yes.
Yes.
You did. Okay.
Okay. And I think, my one response to that would be, Jim, I think you're right. I think, the more you read it, the more you go through it, the clearer it becomes. It's not a total mystery, but you'll have to spend some time reading it, and then you'll have to spend more time reading it, and then spend some more time reading it. I would be cautious as to which commentaries you do pick up, and understand, keep in mind that you're not everybody who writes a commentary is going to be right 100% of the time.
Yeah, absolutely right. I've been able to differentiate between certain things that were brought out.
Right. So I'm looking at a number of them. I'm going through about at least 6 of them, 6 different commentaries with each verse by verse. I'm looking at 6 commentaries. And so it's interesting to note, to make the notes of how often I agree with those 5. And there's some that I agree more than I agree with some of the others. And some of them just get way off on some weird tangents. And where did you come up with that? And there's others that I'm just going right on. You got it spot on, right on the nose. So I think it's important, but you have to read the Bible for the Bible first, and then bring those in, and because you will get some extra background, some of the work that they've done. So there's some value there. So I think it's a good point to make. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And
may I ask one question?
Yes, ma'am.
Or just your opinion? And I found this, with having moved all over the country, being a military spouse all those years, I have found that very few pastors or churches want to study the book of Revelations. Why do you think
that's right?
That is? I mean, or would you even agree with that statement? I mean, that's been my experience. Let's put it that way.
I agree.
And they probably think it's too complicated.
I had a friend that was we were talking a few weeks ago. So he says, "What are you preaching on?" And I told him, and he says, "Are you nuts?"
Oh, yeah, Pastor, you're right.
Probably I am.
Pastor, what we're studying this evening is not suited totally for a Sunday morning sermon. I don't think. Now you might disagree, but this Revelation is very deep, but it's true, and it's about the future, your future.
It's true, but I think yes, you can preach it. I think it works on a Sunday morning, but it's going to have a specific direction it's going to have. You're going to go towards a point, and
Right.
that's in very different contrast to what we're doing here. What we're doing here is the deeper dive on the passage that I previously preached. I didn't go into this depth. I went into
because the thing is when you're given a message, we can't talk to you from the congregation.
Well, at the same time, this is drinking from a fire hose, which is why we're recording it, so that if there's stuff that you didn't pick up, you can go back and you can look at it again and walk through some of it.
Does it take a day or so to get that recording up?
No, it'll be up tonight.
Oh, it'll be up tonight. Okay.
Sure. So, yep, you'll be able to see it as soon as you get up tomorrow morning. It'll be there for you.
I may have an answer for Susie even, but I don't know if she'll care to hear it.